Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. Please rate and review the show. I'm your host, William Liu, and today joined in studio by two very, very special guests. First, I'm joined by Jayme, the new director of the sports documentary, The Grizzlie Truth. Jayme, Kat, how you doing?
Good. It's so cool to be here. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, it was awesome. We got a chance to, me and Alex got a chance to catch a screening of it at TIFF, I think last month, and it was really awesome to see. And of course, one of the principal characters in the film, we got Steve Francis, who was drafted by the Vancouver Grizzlies infamously in 1999. Steve, how you doing?
I love the word infamously. I'm doing great.
No, look, listen, we'll get to the infamous portion too, because I think, I think that's what, partially this film really gets to the root of, right? The film is about exploring why did the Grizzlies leave Vancouver? What did it mean to Vancouver? It's just as a community, as a city, and also trying to hopefully trying to bring some closure to fans. Again, like I mentioned, I got the chance to see it, and it was really awesome to see, and I had a really great time watching it. By the way, the Grizzlie Truth screens at Hot Dog Cinema tomorrow at 7:30 here in Toronto, so people here locally can also catch the film. I highly recommend you do so. But let's first talk about the film with both of you, and then I wanted to dive into both your careers a little bit, if that's all right. Mm-hmm. So Kat, what is this film about? Tell us about the film. How did it come about? And we'll get to Steve's role in it, but let's start with the film itself.
For sure. I mean, I've always wanted to make this film. In film school, over a decade ago, I was always like, if there's one story I want to tell in my career, it's a story of the Vancouver Grizzlies. And that's taken many years. I made Finding Big Country a few years ago, which really kind of opened doors for me. And, was able to, we used that as a proof of concept to get this film going. Because even when I was making Finding Big Country, I always knew I wanted to tell this story. Mm-hmm. And so it took, a few years to get funded, many years to track all the key players. And to me, there was 5 people that were must-haves in the film. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a complete Grizzly story. And of course, that's Bryant Reeves, Mike Bibby, Sharif, Stu Jackson, and of course, Steve Francis. You need all those 5 players or 5 people to tell this story. But yeah, it's been a dream come true. Again, I always tell people I'm a childhood fan who became a filmmaker, and I had no connections to the NBA, to any players. I watched Steve as a kid, so it's been such a joy and an honor to meet everyone, to get to know them as people, human beings, and friends. And I can't tell you how many pinch me moments I've had during the making of this film.
Yeah, I mean, again, when people see the film, they'll realize what I'm saying, what you're saying. But your positivity, your excitement really comes through on screen, and it really helps with the storytelling. And I think that not to give too much of it away, but there is obviously Steve's in it, and it was a great story that's presented in the film. And I'd love for you to share how you even got to meet Steve in the first place, because it's kind of a crazy story. You just kind of pulled up on him. So can you please share that story?
Yeah, I mean, so. Thanks, Steve, for agreeing to be part of the film. But I've been trying to get a hold of Steve for years, and I was freaking out. We were almost on the film, and I was like, we still don't know how to get in touch with Steve. I don't know how to get in touch with him. My researcher, Gerald Narciso, sent me a message one morning. It was a Monday, and it was a screen cap of one of Steve's autograph showings in Houston. Called up my producer, Michael, and I was like, I don't know how you're going to do it, or, you need to get me on a plane, and I need to be at this event. And the event was on Saturday. So we got the message on Monday. I'm on a flight on Friday. And then, I pull up on Saturday and surprise Steve at at this autograph session. And I knew, I was just even if he says no, I just wanted the opportunity, just 5 seconds, just to pitch, just to share what I wanted to do. And it was sort of my pitch was, you are part of Vancouver's history. We are going to be talking about your story, and I want you to be part of that process, and I want you to have a hand in your own narrative. And so that was kind of my pitch, and thankfully, Steve said yes. And not only did he say yes, but he invited me and my team to DC. We had we did a sit-down interview. He invited me to where he grew up, showed me where he was from, and just gave me that kind of access to his story.
Right, right. And Steve, I want to hear your thoughts because you're at this what looks to be like a fan expo, like they sit you down in one of these big warehouses and people line up to come see you and take photos. And then Kat pulls up. I think you were wearing a lot of Grizzlies gear.
I was, yeah.
Of course.
And what was the thought running through your head? Like, oh my God, is someone going to come in and demand answers to Vancouver again?
I initially thought like, oh my gosh, it's Stu Jackson looking for me. And I seen her. I was with my son. Me and him always go to our public autographs together. And, just her, the way authentic she came out like a fan with some good things to hear. I was able to give my opportunity to say how I felt about Vancouver. And the narrative that was painted as I was spoiled and all those things, I could finally speak on it on my behalf. So I thought it was a great opportunity.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's something that the film did a really good job of, is sort of relaying both the human stories around everybody involved, but I think especially for yours, right? Because, there was a lot of controversy surrounding this topic. I mean, it was a little before my time, but I mean, even just doing the research for it or watching the film, I mean, you hear about it all the time. And I think that from your perspective, like, were you almost waiting for that chance to get your side of it in there?
Eventually, I'm actually working on my own documentary, my personal documentary. But one day, Kat came at the right time, in the middle of me doing that. And this is something that I didn't even think about putting in there, but she gave me a push to want to include this in, because everybody else had their, and probably still do to this day, unless they see this film, their perception of what went down. I just wanted to act like a spoiled brat. I didn't want to go. But as you do your history, and similar to what Kat did, I think everything kind of, evens out.
Right. So I'm going to ask you the question that I think you've been asked probably 100 times. You were asked in the film as well, but your side of it at that time, right? So you're coming into the draft. You said specifically that you didn't want to go to Vancouver. What were some of the reasons behind that?
The number one reason, no guarantee that I will be having the basketball in my hand as a rookie.
Right, because they had Mike Bibby already.
Exactly, and respect completely due to Mike Bibby. His rookie campaign was great, even though they didn't achieve a lot of things they want, but they had a great nucleus with himself and Sharif and some of the veterans that they had sprinkled in. So my year at University of Maryland, and throughout my career, as you see, I needed the basketball in my hand.
Yep.
To try to come into the NBA, to try to check shooting guards. At that time, you had Mitch Richmond, who was a shooting guard. You had Eddie Jones. I'm 6'3", 22 years old. And to be, as they said, they would play together, I don't think that would have helped my career. And to be on the bench my rookie year in Canada would have been a mess for me. So I try to prevent all of that.
Well, I was going to say, too, because one thing that, as you mentioned, Kat, like, you guys were able to go see where you grew up, right? And that was a big part of the film. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the film, just seeing, like, the human side of it, right? Where do NBA players come from? Because when we see you guys on the screen, when you guys see you guys at the arena, you guys are, like, invincible, like, superstars, you know what I mean? Especially when you get to your level, too. But I think seeing the human side of it and seeing where you guys came from, I mean, like, it was really important for you, especially at that age, at that time, to be close to home. Is that right?
Exactly. I've been through a lot, and before I even got to college. And, I was starting to learn a lot more about the outside world, should I say, about business and sports and how things were starting to shape up for the new millennium. In 2000, a lot of things were going to change. And I wanted to be a part of that on and off the basketball court. As you see, despite all of the negative press that I got, that same day that I got drafted, I started the Steve Francis Foundation that still runs to this day. So
right.
It was a gift and a curse, but, things happen.
Right. So Kat, I want you to take us into that moment because obviously, you're from Vancouver. You were in that moment. What was the reception like at that time? Because I'm imagining, like, when Vince Carter left Toronto and then when he came back and just, like, all that kind of tension, I imagine it's like that, but even on a higher level. So can you kind of explain to the listener who maybe honestly wasn't even around for that time or didn't follow it, what was the reception like at that time in Vancouver?
When we drafted Steve, you mean?
Yes, and then after the press conference and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Steve wasn't super popular in Vancouver at that time, because we were looking for like our Vince Carter, you know.
Right, right, right.
And Steve was that type of player, that kind of explosive, dynamic, like just superstar. And so yeah, I think a lot of fans were upset. A lot of fans were heartbroken, especially because it was, it's their city. And but as Steve kind of explains in the film, he talks about how players and fans have a different take on what ownership, like what it means to be a player in the NBA, and how players are viewed differently, right? And how that view needs to kind of shift and change and evolve. But I will say, Steve came back to Vancouver, which I thought was like super brave and awesome of him. He came back for the premiere of the Grizzly Truth film, and he got a standing ovation from the fans of Vancouver. So I think this has been such a cool experience for me, because I feel like it's been a healing process, for a healing journey for Vancouver Grizzly fans, for Steve. And, I'm excited about this new kind of friendship that's kind of started to blossom.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's actually one of the central themes. I mean, you even kind of jokingly play on it with the therapy group that you guys were able to do as like former Grizzly fans, talking about sort of what it means. And it's honestly, again, I don't want to give away too much of the film, but it's a really core part of sort of connecting an NBA franchise to the community that they were in, and sort of the bonds that were built. And I think that, again, everyone understands that there would be a lot of hard feelings, right, to lose a franchise, especially one that was really adored, just even despite the fact that, look, they were losing a lot, let's be honest, right? It was just horrendous. But at the same time, like, people love the product, and you can see it in your film. And obviously it's gonna be hard feelings. And to be honest, like, there's so many factors, and that's, I guess, the idea of the film is sort of track down the factors of why Vancouver ultimately lost that team. And I think that, Steve, I'll probably guess to say that it's probably unfair from your perspective that, you've been so villainized in it. Like, but at the same time, like, Kat, as someone who's done the exploration, right? Aside from just Steve saying no, which honestly in modern NBA times, that'd be a very, very regular thing to do. What are some of the other factors that sort of played into it?
It's just a series of unfortunate events after an unfortunate event. The lockout, NBA lockout. We had two during the Grizzlies run, which really hurt us. That's something that we didn't really have time to explore in the film, but that's actually something that really, really did hurt us. Especially, that was when the Grizzlies were starting to pick up momentum and starting to get better, and then the lockout happened, and then we were never able to actually get back to where we were. Then, of course, there's the dollar, and the difference between, because you could argue, like, okay, well, the Raptors had to face that currency problem as well. But the difference, I think, between the Raptors and the Grizzlies was that the Raptors are owned by the Teachers Pension Fund. And, we weren't. So you guys had a bigger safety net to fall on. So there was that, draft picks, the NBA, the rules that they placed on Toronto and the Grizzlies.
Right. You couldn't win the number one pick, right?
We didn't have the number one pick for the first like 3 or 5 years. I'm not forgetting. I've done the research, but I forget if it's 1 or 5. We had a lower salary cap. They placed a lot of obstacles against both franchises, and I feel like if they were to, I think they removed those expansion rules because they were just too onerous.
No, it makes sense, and I think it ultimately hurt both teams, because if you want to put a team somewhere else, you want them to grow. The number one way to grow is to be able to have success through the draft, especially organically. Obviously the Raptors were blessed. The Raptors didn't ultimately select Vince, but made that trade draft night, and then obviously that took off. And yeah, it's interesting to sort of hear about that, and as well. And I think one of the things that you've done so well in this film, Kat, is like you've talked to so many people. Like, I don't remember another NBA documentary or any sports documentary that has talked to. I mean, I think there's probably like at least 20 people that made it into the doc. I'm sure there's lots of people who didn't even ultimately do that. So, like, can you just walk us through like the scope of your research and preparation for this? Because it's really, really well done.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, just because I think I did around 50 plus sit down interviews.
Wow.
And that's 2.5 to 3 hours of sitting down with someone. But even before that, I pre-interview everyone. So first I make my cold calls. I do like an hour like pre-interview just to see, like, okay, is this person going to be good on camera? What stories can I bring out of them? And then after that, I transcribe all the interviews. It's just I have a very thorough process. So we did like 50 plus sit down interviews. We did, I want to say, 20 Zoom interviews, and I did over like 100 like phone calls. I was just trying to track. I have like a spreadsheet of the Grizzlies organization, and it's just like it's in the hundreds of like people that I tracked down who are, even if like people who work the concession at GM Place. Like I wanted to talk to everyone and anyone that could give me a potential lead.
Right. Yeah, no, it's amazing, and it's funny because again, part of the way you structured it was sort of like this investigation into this whole thing, and it felt like that, in a way too, right? Because of all the work you put into it.
Yeah.
Steve, I wanted to ask you, like, what was it like working with Kat as a filmmaker, her and her team, and how do they make you feel comfortable to the point where you're able to invite them to your hometown and really walk them through your story from growing up to where you are now, where you're still growing as a person, obviously, but especially in this relationship with Vancouver that, hopefully, eventually it does get repaired.
Thanks. Hopefully we'll get repaired. But no, it was more that it was an open conversation. It wasn't, all right, we want you to say this, we want you to do that. It was just more of asking me questions about things that they heard and didn't assume, what was written back in the day. Like you said earlier, some people probably just read, what they had heard back in the day. But, just for her to touch back on it and give me an opportunity to have my own voice was something that I look forward to doing. And I think we got that across pretty well.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, Kat, I wanted to ask about your process a little bit as a filmmaker, right? Because it's really unique the way you've really woven together your fandom of the Grizzlies and then also making the documentaries. Because you see this in both this film, The Grizzly Truth, but also in Finding Big Country, and it's such a personal take on something that is something that I think a lot of people care about, but I think everyone can sort of find something within it that sort of connects you to them and also connects the topic to them. So I think it's actually a really effective way to make a documentary. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Like, how did you decide on that? Because as a filmmaker, you have to actually choose to build that narrative around not yourself, because that sounds a little self-serving, but like in that presentation where you tell it from your narrative.
I mean, first I just have to say, like, I have such an incredible team behind this film. So I have to, give my team a huge shout out. I never set out to make films where I was like one of the main subjects. But because of how personal the film was, it just made sense. And even with Finding Big Country, the night before we went to Oklahoma, I was trying to get out of being in the film. And my producer was like, no, I think it's going to be really special to have you and Bryant in the film. And, obviously he was right. But I do, all my films, like I want people who don't even care about the Grizzlies or basketball to connect with the Grizzly truth. And I've been thankfully getting a lot of messages from people who like, I don't know anything about basketball, don't watch the NBA, but I'm a fan of this. And watching your film made me think of the relationship that I had with my dad or my grandfather or whatnot. Right. So I think a great film is able to have universal themes that can connect to people outside of the niche market that, the film is actually, it is for basketball fans and Grizzly fans, but hopefully for other audiences outside of that, range. But with the Grizzly Truth, when we were thinking about, okay, what am I going to share now? Because Finding Big Country was a very personal story. And so, but I already knew it's sort of like, how do we make the Grizzly Truth different, but hit that same personal note? And in early stages of the film, I already knew what I was going to share, and that is my connection, my personal connection to basketball, which has to do with my Filipino history and my identity, and I'm Filipino Canadian, and basketball is the national sport of the Philippines.
Religion
yeah, it's a religion there, and as a kid, I really latched onto that concept as a second generation Canadian kid. Because I was like, oh, that's why I love the Grizzlies, because I'm Filipino Canadian and basketball is the national sport there, and I'm good at basketball. And it was just like, you're kind of grasping at anything to like tie you to Canada, at that age. And so that's why the Grizzlies were so important to me. And so in making this film, I was like, I know what I'm going to share in this film.
Yeah, and that's really well said, because I think especially for immigrants to anywhere, right? You're looking for that thing to ground you to that place. And obviously there are things that we kind of connect through and transcend borders. And I think one of those definitely is sports, right? We're literally watching the World Cup in the office right now. Like it's one of those things that literally binds the world together. Sports has that ability. And I think, yeah, that's really clearly said. And I think in the movie too, you're able to really, even if you're not a Grizzly fan, if you're at all an NBA fan, even if you're not even a sports fan, I think you can really resonate with it. And again, you really get into the weeds too. Like you get all those details. And, I think, my question to you is like, do you hope there is some closure that some, Vancouverites will feel after watching this? And if there is an intended effect, an intended feeling, what is that feeling?
Closure is definitely one of the main things I wanted Grizzly fans, especially, to walk away feeling after watching the film. And I can't tell you how many messages I've gotten since the release in Vancouver. People are like, "Man, Kat, like now I like Steve Francis," and "Man, Kat, now I like Stu Jackson. Like, why'd you have to do that to us?" And I'm like, yes, like that, and that's like the whole point of it is when you realize, like, if you just listen to someone's story, and maybe there doesn't need to be this resentment that you continue to feel for over 20 plus years, right?
Right.
So yeah, closure is definitely, and peace. Like I wanted to bring peace to like Vancouver Grizzly fans. I know it sounds funny because they're a team who was only there for 6 years, but they really meant a lot to so many fans like myself. So yeah, no, closure is definitely one of the main things I wanted, audiences to feel.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I think, look, these are difficult emotions for people to hold on to and handle, especially for so long, right? I think even for within the context of just Canadians in general, I think one of the perspectives that I've come across commonly is just like, Canada sees itself as this like underdog. It's obviously above the States. Everything is about the States in the world, and you're so close to it, and people think you're kind of the same thing, and you really want to stand out. It's like a little brother to a big brother thing, and that I think. Even within that identity of Canada to the United States, I think Vancouver has its own identity relative to Toronto, which in this analogy, Vancouver is more like Canada and Toronto's more like the States, So there's so many of these things layered in. And I think that if there's at all any closure and any sort of like relief in finding some of that through this film, I think that, again, it's really highly recommend everyone in Vancouver to watch this in particular. Now, Steve, I want to get to know your life and your career as well, right? And I've learned so much about your journey that I didn't know about just in preparation of this interview, and it's maybe very sympathetic and empathetic to sort of all the things that you had to go through, right? So I just want to get back to that moment in the draft. So you ultimately didn't want to go to Vancouver, but you ultimately end up in a place like Houston. What was your reaction when you got to Houston in terms of how that situation was going to benefit you more, both as a young player, but also as someone who you could stay closer to home a little bit at least?
Well, actually, I went to junior college right outside of Houston in Pasadena.
Oh, okay, right.
I went to San Jacinto Junior College. But for me, it was the hype of playing with Hakeem Olajuwon and Charles Barkley. I mean,
Man.
I was ecstatic. Throughout my career, I always played with a big guy that was always, the high pick and roll, so I kind of knew that. But just to be able to be on the court with Hakeem, Charles Barkley was cool, but Hakeem Olajuwon, a global icon, somebody as a youngster, I really looked up to. So that was my selling stick that if I want to be good, I have to, try to level up to these all-stars already and these Hall of Famers already. So that's the pressure I was under.
Yeah, well, I mean, you handled it well, right? Like, rookie of the year, like you got off to a really nice start, and it's unfortunate. I think you just kind of caught Hakeem towards the end.
Yeah, right, it was for me. And then when he got traded to Toronto, I cried that day. But just the professionalism of him on the plane, the way he dressed, the way he handled the media, all the things that you want in your quote unquote your next franchise player. And I think that Rockets did a great job of having Hakeem talk to me outside of basketball to prepare me to be in that role. So I think that's kind of missing in today's game too.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean,
some of the veterans now are like 25 years old, so that's a big difference from when I came in.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was reading more about it too, and oddly enough, I feel like because you go from your first year, and then after that's done, they send you to the draft lottery, right? And then you guys win the pick, and it's the Yao Ming draft. Everyone knows. I guess this is like we're fast forwarding a little bit of time, but like you're still young in your career. You go to the draft lottery, and then it's a Yao Ming draft. You guys take Yao, right? And I'm always really curious about this, just because I'm Chinese, and I'm definitely going to ask every question I can about Yao. Obviously, I don't think this is a surprise probably to you, but yeah, what was that transition like, right? Because man, I mean, you guys you had a really successful start to your career, but then you're about to add the #1 pick, and you guys know that you're building something there. So what was your first impression, obviously, when you basically found out that you guys were going to have that pick?
I was happy. Hakeem, like I said, Hakeem was gone. I was able, myself, along with the Rockets organization, we looked at a lot of his tapes. For me, I at first I didn't think it was real. Anybody didn't think it was real. They had him in Chicago.
7'6" doesn't sound real.
They had him in Chicago working out. We were watching all these tapes. Can he shoot? Can he do this? And when he got to Houston, his humbleness with all the noise that was around him, and still is to this day, he didn't try to overshadow any of us on the basketball team. He didn't try to overshadow the organization. He just wanted to fit in and play basketball.
Right. And can you just describe a little bit of like what the media circus was around Yao?
Oh my God!
I know what that was as a Chinese person, but I think just take us back to that moment.
I mean, every Asian outlet at every practice. I must have did more interviews about Yao than myself. What did he eat today? What did he wear today? Did he shoot left? Did he shoot right? Did you drive him to? I'm like, wow. They never asked you about the game, but I mean, for him to step in, he did have his interpreter, Colin Pine. I know Colin. He went to the University of Maryland too, so I had a relationship with his interpreter, and we were able to have our own personal conversations outside of basketball, which helped our relationship grow from day one.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, when Yao went into the Hall of Fame, I think leading up to that point, I think he wrote a piece about you in the Players Tribune, and you wrote about Yao as well in the Players Tribune as well a little later on. And I was one of the funny things I noticed in there was apparently the Houston Rockets, in preparation for Yao coming in, brought like a Chinese professor or something like that to try to teach you guys like some customs or whatever, essentially like how to deal with Yao, right? But my question is, well, two parts actually. One, what kind of things were they teaching you? And then two, what kind of things American were you trying to teach Yao at that time?
I think the organization needed to be more in tune of the Chinese culture. Okay. I think with Yao, when he came to practice, when the cameras weren't there, he was himself. And I think that helped him. He came over. I remember when he came to the game, and then we had practice. But I think the culture shock for the organization landing such a big move and knowing that they had involved the Chinese community, and let's not get it twisted. Texas is not really a Chinese state, so
from it.
Yeah, it was hard for them to engage with the Chinese community. They had to take their time and be very respectful the way that you approach Asian people. And I think they did a great job.
Yeah, no doubt. So I got to imagine there was tons of stories about just, I'm sure he's a rookie, right? And, he doesn't know anything, but it seems like you guys were able to become friends really quickly. Why do you think that is? And what'd you guys do? Like, what were you trying to like show him in America,
I felt what he felt because all the cameras on him. He hadn't played a basketball game yet. Everybody's had so many expectations.
He's a #1 pick.
He's a #1 pick. Is he going to bump heads with the infamous Steve Francis from Vancouver? So I know all of those things.
Meanwhile, you guys are really good friends.
And at the same time, we're riding around in my Hummer around Houston, eating and
that's so cool.
Just chilling out. But I wanted to make him feel as comfortable as possible, watching those media people just chase him day and night. And I think a lot of our teammates felt the same way. We had to try to protect them in certain situations.
No, that's really nice, man. And again, it's really fun to read about this. Obviously, as someone who like Yao is really important to me, but like it's like little details like how I think you were describing in your piece that when Yao stayed at a hotel, he would push 2 queen beds together and make a Yao bed.
Yeah. So really, they would call in advance and have the beds ready. So I never forget. I busted in there one day. I just jumped on the beds for nothing. Just to be like, man, what? Me and Moochie used to go over this room all the time. So
I actually, when the Grizzlies left, we started driving to Seattle to watch games, right?
Right, yeah, of course.
And one of the first games that I watched when the Grizzlies left was you and Yao
In Seattle.
in Seattle, because that's what Vancouver Grizzlies fans had to do when the team moved to Memphis, because Seattle was so close. It was just an hour away. It was sort of like a weekend getaway to Seattle, watch an NBA game. But yeah, so Steve, I've seen you a few times in your NBA career.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, that's funny too, because I forgot to ask this earlier, because I'm kind of trying to ask things in chronological order. But when you returned to Vancouver for the first time, and I want to ask both of you this, right? But for you playing in that game, the atmosphere, what was that like? Because I gotta imagine that's one of the most hostile crowds you've ever played.
It was unbelievable. I didn't think it would be that bad.
Yeah.
But I expected boos. I knew I had to come play 48 minutes, and that's what I looked to do. I knew the players on the other team were going to be on 10, so I had to be on 100.
Yeah.
And early on in the game, the fans were very, very hostile throughout the whole game.
Yeah.
But it seemed like a hockey atmosphere to me.
Well, I was maybe when I was one of your teammates was describing it, like people were throwing stuff on the court, or like maybe throwing stuff, or like tomatoes or batteries.
Yeah,
I don't remember what the story was.
Yeah, they were. In today's game, that would have cost so much. But yeah, I seen batteries, tomatoes, and I can still hear the sound of those batteries skipping across that wood floor.
No, that's wild.
And I was like, wow, what if this would have hit me? But like I said, our adrenaline was running so high. That could have been a final series right there, that game.
Yeah.
Kat, were you at the game?
I wasn't. The very first game you came back to town, I wasn't. My brother and my dad were, and I remember I was really upset because they went. Like my brother got to go and I didn't. But I remember hearing about it because it was like my dad. My dad actually. I mean, this doesn't make the cut, but he didn't like the way that you were treated. Especially there was a really hard foul the very first few minutes of the game. I don't know if it was like Antoine. I forget who. It was like a really hard foul, and like GM place just erupted.
Oh yeah, it was loud.
It's a hockey atmosphere.
It was not the nicest crowd that night.
Yeah. No, I mean, and listen, I think if you go back to watch it, I think it's probably one of your best plays ever. But I think you put it off the glass.
Backboard. Yeah. You throw it off to your
Oh man,
that was
so
cold.
good.
I was stuck.
That was cold,
I was stuck right there. I was like, man, it was just so loud.
Yeah.
So I couldn't. They were booing. I didn't have anybody open, so I was like, let me just throw it off the backboard and try to catch it.
Yeah, it was. So. I remember that.
That's painful. But listen, I mean, it's kind of similar. It reminds me a lot of like when Vince came back to Toronto for the first time. You know, like the same kind of like atmosphere, fans on top of you, and just like hard feelings. But you know, it's funny because obviously like Grizzlies, they were looking for their Vince, right? Vince was like such a big hit, such a big star right away, and then the way I'm thinking about it is 2000, the dunk contest in Oakland. Everyone remembers it for Vince, right? And rightfully so, man. Vince obviously stole the show, but the final, you, Vince, Tracy, and when you go back and watch the full dunk contest, I feel like everyone just watches those 4 dunks by Vince, and they're so good. They're all perfect 50s. Like, everything's amazing. But when you watch the full dunk contest, like, Steve, you held your own, man.
I mean, before the dunk contest, they already said he won it. So everybody.
Who said that, though?
The groupies, Kenny Smith, Isaiah Thomas, Cheryl Miller, all 3 of those groupies.
And they were judges, right?
Yeah, they were judges.
Yeah, that's not right, man. Come on.
I was surprised that Kenny Smith, he's a Houston Rocket. But, it was Vince's time in the NBA, and they wanted to go with what was popular. But at the same time, he definitely won it with the arm in the rim. Like, I was like, what the heck is this?
Right, because he's rubbing the arm. And and you're like, what's he even doing?
And if you look at that tape, everybody was just quiet. Like, what did we just see?
Yeah.
And but for me, it was always a dream. You see Dominique, you see Spud Webb, you see Michael Jordan, all those guys in dunk contests, and given the opportunity, I just wanted to be there. So I was happy.
No, I mean, listen, you weren't just being there. Like, you were the runner-up that day. You had some of the best dunks in that entire run. I mean, honestly, it was such a big coming out moment. And I'm just thinking about like, man, if that was Vancouver versus Toronto in that kind of final and just building up the rivalry, like obviously like that's the dream and the fantasy that I think Grizzlies fans probably would have wanted to have. But at the same time, it's just like, man, well, what a moment, honestly. Yeah. So, what else did I want to ask here? Oh, yeah. So, I mean, Steve, just going back to your career. So, obviously, you go from Houston, right? You had a really, really good time there. 3 All-Stars appearances. You guys were winning and all that other stuff. But eventually Jeff Van Gundy gets brought in, and it was a big difference, obviously working with Jeff versus working with Rudy T. And then you guys ultimately decide that what, we're gonna bring in Tracy, right? And the rest of your career, going to Orlando, going to New York, then going back to Houston, like how was that for you? Like, and what was that feeling of like, what, for NBA players, like you finish your career, and when you see it start to wind down, like what's that kind of feeling? Because you go from the highest of highs to that feeling. How are you dealing with that emotionally during that stretch?
Like I said at the beginning, when the Rockets traded away their best player, Hakeem Olajuwon, I had no right to be upset.
Okay.
To be witnessing Hakeem leave Houston to go to Toronto. Just like Van Gundy said, everybody thinks they can't be replaced. I thought I would finish my career in Houston. It was definitely hard. I just had bought a new house.
Right, yeah.
So it was definitely kind of hard. But, basketball would take care of itself. But, yeah, it was tough. And like I said, every year after that, it was always a different coach. So after Van Gundy, I played for probably 5 other coaches in 6 years. So it was kind of tough. Just to learn one system is hard in 3 years. Imagine learning one every October.
Yeah, no doubt. And, yeah, I'm just thinking about it too. It's just, again, like I've read so much about your life and the interviews that you've done, and you've been really open with sort of the struggles that you had, obviously even towards the end of your career and post basketball, and it's really inspirational to sort of see you step through that, right, and continue to be a role model in your community and a great parent as well. And I think it's a really inspirational story for people who aren't familiar with this. Definitely go look into it, but. Kat, I wanted to bring you back in the conversation as well because, when there's a part, again, I don't want to give away the film, but there's a part in the film where let's just say Ja Morant's somewhere in the film, okay?
Yeah.
You don't know where. But when I'm watching Ja Morant sometimes and I'm watching Steve Francis tape, I'm just like, yo, what? Like, this is like if what should have happened 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
There's a lot of people who've been saying that too, and I see what they're saying. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And I don't know, Steve. Do you see a little bit of that as well? Because
my son, when Memphis plays Houston, so we go to the game.
Yeah,
and that's my son's favorite player. And I go to Ja's dad, and I said, "Hey, listen, man, your son has to come." So Ja Morant's dad pulls me over and said, "What are you talking about? Ja had to watch all your games in our backyard. He needs to come talk to you." So,
wow.
So my son hears that, and my son is like, he's 15, 14. He's like, my dad, he doesn't know.
Nah, you've never been cooler as a dad than that moment.
Yeah,
man.
so, I mean, but it was great for me and Josh's dad to have that conversation. And, I think he's very, very much what the Grizzlies are about. It could say Vancouver, but it says Memphis. But, the name is still there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kat, the last thing I was going to say is it's just like, what's the relationship right now between Vancouver and Memphis? Like, I think, they still do wear
Check
your jerseys.
The movie out. Check the movie out.
Yeah.
Check the movie out.
I think the film, the film has many goals. One of them is to bridge that connection between Memphis and Vancouver. And in fact, there's a family that just messaged me on Instagram, actually a friend of mine, and his son is just getting into basketball. They're going to Memphis to watch a game.
Wow.
So, which I think is just, that's really cool. And I'm hoping that more of that continues to happen. I have also been getting a lot of messages from people who are like, Kat,
How dare you?
I never wanted to cheer for Memphis, but after watching your film and the people that you interviewed, again, I don't want to give it away. It's like, how can I, I'm now looking for a Memphis jersey, or now I can kind of cheer for Ja and not be like super heartbroken about it. But no, I think it's so cool to like kind of bridge that gap. And I would love to see Memphis come to Vancouver for an exhibition game. Like that would
minimum.
be so cool.
That should happen. Why doesn't it happen every year? Actually?
That would be like. So I'm kind of, I'm gonna be gunning for that in the next few years.
Yeah, I feel like the league owes you guys, because I feel like one thing that people skirt around, they're always like, oh, Steve this and Stu Jackson this, or even the ownership this. It's like, yeah, the NBA had a big part to play in this as well. You
Exactly.
can't just let them skate by this one. But anyway, look, this movie is the film is awesome. It's called The Grizzly Truth. If you're in Toronto, it screens at Hot Dog Cinema on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. There's also going to be an open court and skills competition from 1 to 4 at the Gold Ring Center beforehand as well. So, Kat, just tell us about all the details. Where can people follow and everything?
So starting today, The Grizzly Truth is having its Canada-wise theatrical release. So we're in 11 cities across Canada. Check our website or Instagram just to get all the screening times and dates. And then tomorrow we're in Toronto. Steve is going to be there. Jimmy King, like an OG Raptor / member of the Fab Five, is going to be. I'm so stoked to meet Jimmy. There's also going to be an open gym and skills competition from 1 to 4 p.m. at the Gold Ring High Performance Center, led by Slam Canada. I will be there. Steve will be there. Jimmy will be there. It's going to be a family fun, friendly event. Encourage everyone to come out to that, and then to make it to the screening. There's going to be a Q&A after with Steve and I on stage, and Jimmy as well. I'm just super excited. It's really cool to bring the film here to Toronto. Like, we're in Raptor land talking about the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping, I'm hoping that we fill all the theaters across all cities in Canada, because I do think this is a way to prove that Canada deserves another NBA team. Like, if people come asking me how we should get an NBA team, it's like, let's this is a way to show the NBA that Canadians care about basketball, that Vancouver misses the Grizzlies, that we all miss the Grizzlies, and we deserve another chance at the NBA.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, I want to say congratulations to both of you on the film. Congratulations on the release. Best of luck with everything. You guys can be mad busy. Appreciate your time. And everyone go check out the film. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. I'm your host, Walu. You'll be listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, William Liu. Big thanks to Kat Jayme and Steve Francis for joining us in the first segment. We had a long discussion, and I mean, it's just cool, man. We just got to talk to Steve Francis. That was sick. So anyway, we're joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong, who's here mostly to read the shout-outs. So go ahead.
Yeah, we're here to talk about something even more exciting. The Raptors taking on the Orlando Magic tonight. But first, Friday's shout-outs. Shouts to Derek Brandeo.
Shout out!
Told you to hit that Asian dad drop when Will was asking Steve Francis about Yao Ming, but that was vetoed. That's okay. Vito Corleone back there. Jennifer Rolnick still on vacation. Frank Baraska, we're counting down the days until Frank the Tank is leaving us, man.
It's tough.
Yeah, so kind of sad about that.
That man has incredible vibes. We don't even have conversations.
Incredible
that
hair,
often,
incredible vibes.
Yeah.
He's a drummer too. No, he's the most interesting man in the world. Man.
But actually, though.
Devang, Kyle Crabb. Once again, tell me one thing you know about Kyle Crabb, man.
You know, he's a Sportsnet employee.
Infamously drafted in 2021.
Did I pronounce his name right?
That's my guy, Kyle. That's my guy.
Josiah. J.R. Manatad, who's pulling 15 Steve Francis clips at the moment. Chris Tarosa, Ryan Fabro, Dan Tolman, Greg Sansoni, Pat Flash, everybody else supporting us behind the scenes. Want to shout out to all our guests this week. Lindsay Dunn. Not sure if you know, she did a quick feature on us for City News about the Raptors Show. Talk to us a little bit about the live event that we were organizing for next Monday.
I'm pretending like I'm surprised, even though we weren't actually filmed for this interview.
Yeah, Mark Saval messaged me this morning and said that his dad saw us on breakfast television. I guess it ran during that time.
Oh,
yeah, because I was like, I definitely wasn't on. I wake up at noon. Blake Murphy Tuesdays as always. Joseph Kasharo, I'm 38.1. Joseph Kasharo, Joe Wolfon, Faisal Kamisa, and of course, Kat Jayme and Steve Francis.
Man.
Any other shout outs that you want to give?
What other shout outs do I want to give?
It's fine, bro.
You know what? Shout out my friend Tommy. Big win for Croatia.
Tommy boy.
I mean, I guess, yeah.
What up, Tom?
Huge fan, obviously, of just Croatian football because, you know, he's Croatian. And
okay.
Yeah. Big result for them to beat Brazil.
I'm sure Zach Lowe's happy. He might pop that one beer that he always talks about on his pod.
Oh man, the way Zach talks about one beer, I'm like, just have it.
That's the 2 Coors Light in the freezer right now.
Oh man, can't wait for that.
Yeah. So what's up, man? They're playing the Magic tonight.
Yeah, they're playing the Orlando Magic tonight, Alex.
Actually, hold on.
What?
And now it's time for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game.
There we go.
As I mentioned, the Toronto Raptors are in Orlando for the first of 2 straight games against the Magic on the road. The line for tonight's game at Bet Rivers is Raptors -8. Will, what's up?
I do think it'll be more competitive than the last one.
Well, I hope so, because I don't think it can get any less competitive.
You know, as an entertainment product, I thought that, you know, outside of Bowl, like they really did struggle. But, you know, you would think that they would come through with a little bit more fire, especially in their home building. You know, obviously, infamously, Amway Center is a hard place to get wins. No, I'm being sarcastic. But, I look, these are tough games for the Raptors only in the sense that there's no upside. You win, no one cares. And then if you lose, it just starts the outrage machine again. And I think that, I don't know, the Raptors are in this weird place where people aren't super happy with them.
Okay.
Right? And that's not to say, like, again, I'm not taking myself out of the equation. Like, there's obviously been many times this season I've not been happy with the Raptors. But, like, they're in a weird spot. Like, people aren't super thrilled about them right now. And I don't think there's anything they could do here against Orlando that would change that for that faction who is upset. But yeah, I mean, you still got to go in and take care of business. The Raptors have been playing better basketball of late. I mean, obviously, you can't play worse than losing in the first quarter, back-to-back games. But you know, they've competed against Boston. They weren't able to get the job done, but I thought they played, you know, a lot better in that game. Then they took care of business against Orlando. Now they took care of business against the Lakers, and you just hope that they bank these 2 wins here. I mean, Raptors -8. I think I'll probably still with the Raptors. You know, with Pascal playing the way he is, I just didn't see a lot of defenders on that Magic team that sort of had that ability to match up with him. And, you know, I hope Scottie playing close to home. You know, I think he'll probably have family in attendance. You know, a strong performance from him would really go a long way. And then, yeah, we'll see if Fred continues to find something with the jumper. Hopefully he eventually comes out of this slump. But obviously he has been struggling of late. But you do figure that the matchup is right for him to at least have some opportunities to score, as long as he's not ISOing Bol again. Because man, he had like 10 feet of space against Bol, and Bol still blocked his shot. So no shots against Bol. But aside from that, hopefully Fred continues to get better.
Yeah. So our pick is Raptors -8. That was between the lines. Brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. All right, man. I'm done. What's up? 2 more minutes.
So what was your review of the interview?
Oh, it was great, man. It's great. I gotta start bringing you more guests into the studio, especially former players. I think it's just a different level of conversation, and really do appreciate Steve Francis dropping by and Kat as well talking about the film. But Steve just being, I think it's cool, when guys have played in the NBA and had a chance to reflect back on the ups and downs of their careers and just be open about it, right?
Yeah.
Because I listen, like when we sent out that we were promoting that Steve Francis was going to be on the show today, I was checking, someone on Twitter replied, was like, please take this show off the Vancouver feed today. And I understand there's a lot of bitterness. And I think it's really cool for Steve to be able to tell his side of the story. People don't have to forgive him or find closure in it, but I think at least for him to tell his side of the story and get it out there, like that's the most that he can do. That's all he can do.
Yeah, and honestly, I find storytelling to be more compelling when you understand who the villain, quote unquote, is and where they're coming from, right? What their motivations, sort of what was going on there. I mean, personally, I don't think he was a villain, but again, I don't know, what was I doing in 2000? I was immigrating to Canada, and I think we had a layover in Vancouver from Beijing to Vancouver. So that's the extent of Vancouver knowledge.
Oh, okay.
I do a lot of prep for this research. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I watched a lot of documentaries. I watched
you sent me a lot of podcast links yesterday that Steve was on. It's cool. Well, listen, everyone, have a great weekend. We're really excited about the live event on Monday.
Oh, that's right. The live event's on Monday.
Yep.
Man,
I'll be hard at work prepping for that this weekend and changing my winter tires.
Wow.
Have a great weekend.
Another
everyone.
long weekend of Alex hanging out with his father.
My best friend.
Okay. But that does it for us today. I'm your host, Willu, and you've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Thanks again to producer and co-host Alex Wong, Kat Jayme, Steve Francis, Stevie Franchise, our board producer Derek Brandale, and Frank Baraska for helping to the YouTube stream. Talk to you next week.
Not mine. I'm the lethal.